We don't know what Africa would be like without the white influence. We don't know what it would be like without the Rockefellers and De Beers and all of them. We don't know what Africa would have been like. We do know that there were greater places in Africa other than Egypt, which is the only one they let us know about.
Concurrently and simultaneously during the Pyramid Age, there are great things happening in West Africa. But we very seldom. There are nations known as Dartichet. Dartichet is now, would geographically presently be located where Ghana is. We had the Nak culture, which is where we today would call Nigeria. We have the Monomotapan Empire in what today we call Zimbabwe. There are over 300 stone structures in southern Africa. And then you have that great structure in the great Zimbabwe that shows a direct relationship to the Grand Lodge of Luxor in Egypt. You have Puanit, which is in today's Somalia, Ethiopia. You have the Kush empires that are simultaneously happening. When Hatshepsut, the great Pharaoh king, although she was a woman, she was a Pharaoh king, sitting on the throne of Kemet, her cousin sits on the throne of Puanit, or what we call Somalia. There are great things happening historically across the African continent. You have the kingdoms of Kuba and Luba in Central Africa.
Mansa Musa was the king of Mali in the 1300s, very wealthy brother. During the dark age of Europe was going through a dark age, Africa was thriving. It was the gold capital. Mansa Musa was considered the wealthiest man on the planet at the time. Mansa Musa had a very well-known pilgrimage to Mecca, where he went to Egypt and went to Mecca and went through Egypt, and he gave out so much gold, it threw off the Egyptian economy. In today's terms, Mansa Musa gave away what would be the equivalent of $100 million in gold.
The African was the first race to circumnavigate the entire globe.
All over Africa, all over the world, the peoples of color that they call Africans, Alkebulanans, we were all over the world. So to say that in Ghana they had the Ashanti.
Africa was never barbaric. Our ancestors were never barbaric. Our ancestors were not the illiterate, naked-walking savages as they have been portrayed in a white man's insinuation of the world history. And here is why. Africans invented navigation, and they were the first people to sail South America and Asia before Europeans. They also invented medicine, and medical procedures such as bullet removal, brain surgery, autopsy, skin grafting, cesarean were all African invention, not European. Africans also invented architecture and engineering, and we can see this from some of the massive stone complexes and huge castle-like compounds present in Mozambique and Zimbabwe. Our ancestors were also the brains behind mathematics, astronomy, international trade, philosophy, art, metallurgy, and many other powerful spiritual practices whose artifacts were stolen and hidden in the European Museum.
Septimus Severus was African, and he was the one that actually took the Roman fight up north into England.
The Russian language that we know today can be attributed to a black man named Alexander Pushkin. He created the modern Russian language because they were speaking French and other types of language there.
Had it not been for someone like Alexander Pushkin, Russians would be speaking French today.
A lot of people say that people...
A man holding 1,000 patents. Well, 90% of them he stole.
Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas Edison, who are probably considered America's two greatest inventors of all time. But guess who was designing their blueprints for the patent application? A black man. Now let's think about this for a minute. If you invent something, why do you need me to do the blueprints for the patent application? If it's your idea, how in the hell can I do the blueprints for it? You can't do the blueprints for my idea. I have to do them. So if Latimer is doing the blueprints, if he is your chief draftsman, and he's doing your blueprints for your patent application, Alexander Graham Bell, did you invent the telephone, or did Lewis Latimer invent the telephone?
Thomas Edison had a whole troop of people that was in his sweatshop, and depending on the invention, he would hand it over to that particular department and tell them, see what it is that does, and then do something a little different, and we'll patent that. And when he took Granville T. Wood's information and tried to make it his own, the court said no.
The watermelon and black people stereotype, that came and that was popularized by Thomas Edison. Around 1890, Thomas Edison put together this Nickelodeon reel. There were these African-American men who were joking around, shucking and jiving and kind of mugging for the camera, and they were eating watermelon. And Edison filmed this, put this out, and the general public saw this, and they said, okay, African-American people must really love watermelon. And right after that film came out, thousands of postcards and all types of memorabilia flooded the market of African-American people eating watermelon. So that watermelon stereotype was popularized by Thomas Edison.
A lot of people don't know there's an African-American male who is significant, has patents on the first major computer chip.
This is the man who went down in history as the person who invented education. Just like most people think that civilization started in Europe. Well, it did not. Civilization started in Mesopotamia and the Great Kemet of Africa. Then later on, about 1200 BCE, was when civilization was reaching the Central America, the modern-day Mexico. So there is no way a white man would have invented education when the first university in the world, the University of Timbuktu, was located in Africa. The University of Timbuktu was established by Mansa Musa, who was a Malian empire and the richest man in the world by that time. Subjects like philosophy, cultural studies, language studies, advanced African grammar were mandatory, while subjects like history, algebra, physics, medicine, chemistry, arithmetic, and astronomy from the Dogon people were totally optional. Students who did complete the course of study received clothes, blocks of salt, livestock, and money as gifts upon their graduation. Graduation ceremony consisted of wearing a white garment while riding a white horse.
Why was Muammar Gaddafi killed? Muammar Gaddafi was murdered because he, along with the other African heads of state, were about to bring into existence Africa's first central bank. They were erecting a central bank in Africa, which was going to do what? Back its money to the resources under the ground in Africa. Now, what would that have done to the global economic order? Remember, the United States dollar isn't backed on any natural resource. The British pound isn't backed on any natural resource. The Canadian dollar, the European Union, their currency isn't backed on any natural resource because Europe doesn't have a lot of natural resources. Africa does. So if they would have been successful in creating a central bank of Africa, coming up with a unitary currency, and then backing that currency to the material wealth under the soil, they would have bankrupted.
Most Africans were told that Muammar Gaddafi was killed because he was a dictator and a terrorist. But were those really the reasons behind his assassination? Libya was sinking in poverty before Gaddafi. But after Gaddafi became the president, Libya became one of the richest countries in Africa. After making Libya's GDP per capita the highest in Africa, he wanted to unite Africans into the United States of Africa. He then went ahead to demand a compensation of $777 trillion from all countries that colonized Africa as payment for the 400 years of slavery that Africans went through in their hands. Gaddafi also strengthened ties with neighboring countries such as Egypt, Morocco, Syria, Tunisia, Chad, amongst others, as well as maintaining close relations with countries like France and Russia. He also connected with Latin American countries such as Venezuela and Cuba, which led him to cultivate an intensive network of contacts and uncomfortable influence for Europe and the United States. Gaddafi was becoming a threat, so through divide and rule, they assassinated him. Feminism did not exist in Africa because patriarchy was a Western import that was brought into Africa by white people during slavery and colonization. And here is how. While Europeans were busy arresting, murdering witches and treating their women like trash in Europe, our male African ancestors, on the other hand, never had an issue with giving women power. African women were equally yoked with men, and community roles in ancient Africa were divided according to age group, not gender. Elderly women in Africa were considered the goddesses of the universe. Pregnant African women were highly protected and regarded as portals of life. Female African leaders and warriors were highly prominent. They held critical roles both politically, socially, and economically. Some, like Princess Yenenga, were great warriors who led their troops to war. But the minute the white man set foot in Africa, he brought with him gender discourses and male chauvinism, which was well promoted by their religion. Therefore, African men started treating African women the way white men treated theirs.